This program is sponsored by Tilson Solicitors.
Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to the Legal Forum, which will be our last episode for this season. Now in the Legal Forum each week we discuss common topics in layman terms to help guide you with legal advice, breaking down that complex language of law. The Legal Forum will also highlight real life cases and scenarios. Over the series we've looked back at some common topics from Islamic wills, your rights under arrest, spouse visas, those who've overstayed and inheritance tax. If you wish to watch any of the episodes, then you can by visiting our website www.islamchannel.tv or email us at legalforum@islamchannel.tv. Now before we start the show, we must remind you the views and opinions expressed in Legal Forum should be considered for informational purposes only and not case-specific legal advice. All topics are discussed in a generic nature and it's important that you either consult with a CAB, law centre or a solicitor before relying on it. Today, we're going to be looking at UK visa applications and new global talent visas. I'd like to welcome back to the show Sandeep Chandy, an immigration solicitor who has more than 13 years of experience in this sector to discuss the topics. Sandeep, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Very
complex topic to end off the series. What is the current visa status for people who are currently living in the UK? How does it all work currently?
I think it's important to understand how the system is broken up. So we have three main parts in the UK system. You've got the immigration rules themselves, and that governs who can come and stay in the UK. The second part is European regulations, and that's actually EU law that governs all European citizens who can come and stay in the UK, and also their family members. And that's implemented in our system in the European regulations. And then the third and final main part is British nationality law, which is completely different from the UK immigration rules, and that's about who can become British, and that represents children and parents. If we delve into the immigration rules themselves, there's four main parts there. So we've got the points-based system. That's for people coming to the UK to study, to work, to invest, open up business. Second part of the rules is for refugees, so people seeking asylum for other countries. And obviously with the situation in the world in the last 10 years, you've got a lot of people coming in and seeking humanitarian protection in the UK. Next part concerns family rules, so it's the rules on which you can stay with a partner, whether you're married or unmarried, or if you've got a child in the UK, whether they be British or not. And then the final part of the immigration rules is the private life category, which is about how long someone's been here and the rights they accrue over some amount of time. It looks at children who've been here for 7 years, adults who have had a visa for 10-year continuous period, and also adults who have been here 20 years, whether they've had a visa in that time or not. So that's an overview of how the system works.
Now, is there a main difference? We talk about families just for the moment. If your child, obviously then we're looking to getting an extended visa or permanent UK citizenship, if they're born in the UK as opposed to coming from another country and being given a temporary visa, is there a major difference between the two?
There is, and then that's also broken up into children who are here and have been here illegally or illegally, and then also children who become British. There's a massive difference between the two things. There hasn't been a big change in this area. I think there's been a bit of sense now by the government. The hostile environment is reducing. It's not quite what it was, a few years ago. They've relaxed the rules. I mean, the current rules for families and partners and children have been in place since 2012, but with the decision-making going on at the moment, you can see a sea change in the way the Home Office are thinking. They understand that people here with young children aren't going to go anywhere very fast. They don't detain families with children, so it's made a difference the way the Home Office implement decisions.
So if you've been here on a temporary visa, Sandeep, how long does it take you to become settled or having permanent residency? What's the timeframes currently under the law?
It varies depending on how you started your visa, depending on if you come from abroad or from the UK. I think it's important to understand the difference in the terminology, and the difference is nothing, because it can be called settlement, it could be called ILR or indefinite leave to remain, PR or permanent residence. They all mean the same thing. I think there's a lot of confusion around about I've got ILR but now I need my settlement. They're exactly the same. In terms of how fast you can get to that point, it really depends on what visa you're on and how that visa started. But there's two main strands. So there are visas that you've got to complete a 5-year period in, and then you can become settled or ILR or PR, and other visas where you've got to complete a 10-year period. It really depends on which route you're under.
If something happens to you, or for instance, you've maybe done a petty crime or something when you're on a temporary visa, does that automatically mean that you will not get extended leave or permanent residency going forward? Or are there some conditions that if you've made a mistake in life, that you still could have the benefits of being a United Kingdom citizen?
Criminal record can have a massive impact on the decision. Less so when you're extending a visa. So, for example, if you're in a 5-year route, for family visas, there's usually a block of 2.5 years at a time. So you'll have 2 blocks of 2.5. You complete your 5 years. Extending criminal convictions don't count so much when you're extending a visa, depending on the severity, and it's usually the sentence that the Home Office are considering. So matters that are resolved without going to a court, they looked at less harshly. Sentences over 1 year can count against an extension, and any sentence over 4 years is almost going to bar you from extending your visa. When you get to the point of settlement, they'll look at the whole thing again. So it really does depend on the severity of the case and how bad the record is.
I mean, is there a natural kind of time frame or an average? I suppose in this sort of scenario, there's no average about anything. But I mean, somebody coming here under temporary visa to get full British citizenship, what is the normal time frame somebody would be under to gain their citizenship in the UK?
So the most standardised period is 5 years. So if you're coming from abroad on a spouse visa or because you've got children in the UK, you complete a period of 5 years and then you can apply for settlement, as we were discussing a few minutes ago. Someone who has come to the UK and isn't here based on their family, they can build up settlement after a period of 10 years. So that there's a massive difference there. And that's where they're on a combination of visas. For example, someone who's come as a student and continue to extend that visa, or perhaps started as a student and then went into a working category, perhaps after that moved into the spouse category. In terms of British nationality, now that's a completely different area, as we discussed at the beginning, from the immigration rules. It's primary legislation, whereas the immigration rules are controlled by the government and they can be changed quite quickly. Nationality law, really, the most of it at the moment has commenced from 1984 and it hasn't seen many changes since then. And what nationality requires is once you are settled, whether you had a 5-year period to get settled or whether you had to wait a period of 10 years, you should be settled for at least 1 year. So when you've held that status for a year, whether we call it settlement, ILR, PR, it's all the same thing, you can then qualify and apply for nationality.
Now recently, obviously, the United Kingdom left the EU, as we're all well aware. There's no kind of crystal ball here as what's going to happen in the future, but currently, has there been any law changes? I know that we've done on previous programmes, we have this kind of transition period that we're running under. Is there anything that people need to kind of look to have in place for when the UK maybe has its own laws changed in the next year or so?
Well, changes are underway. Nothing changes officially until at least the end of this year, and I think we discussed previously, I think the transitional period will extend further than that, possibly to the end of next year as well. Small changes at the moment are now to bring in European nationals into the UK system. So whereas at the beginning of the conversation we're having, European law is completely on its own, European nationals are now being brought into the UK system. So the term permanent residence has become settlement, like it is in the UK system. I don't think there's anything for people to worry about significantly right now. It is important that they do actually register themselves, because when before Brexit got underway, it didn't matter whether you register yourself with the Home Office at all if you're a European national. But now it's very important for those people to do that. There is a deadline actually by the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
So that's an important step.
So that's a very important step, isn't it?
Nationals should be taking.
Is there any benefit to you staying in the United Kingdom just on a visa or an extended visa or a permanent visa, as opposed to becoming a British citizen? Is there any kind of benefits for you individually?
Well, British nationality entails benefits, consular assistance in another country, full rights and voting rights in the UK. So it is the aim for a lot of people who come to the UK to actually achieve British nationality. I think that people look forward to getting a British national passport. For example, in other countries, for example, someone from India, you can't hold dual nationality. That's a big difference between India and Pakistan, for example. So some people from India will just choose to keep their Indian nationality, because if they take British nationality, they've actually got to renounce the Indian citizenship and they'll lose rights in that country. So it really does depend on which nationality we're talking about and whether dual citizenship is an option or not.
So in that case, obviously, it's not an option. You have to renounce one to have the other. Now, the buzzword at the moment is this global talent visa, and we hear a lot about this in the news and the press that we read. What is it?
It's a recent announcement. It will start very, very shortly, actually. It's part of the whole reaction to Brexit and making sure some of the immigration that's going to be lost there can be made up elsewhere. And it is this government's mind in particular to bring in people with specific skills. This new global talent visa is actually replacing a category that was already in the system, which was under the points-based system, Tier 1 exceptional talent. They rejigged the system so that the UK Research and Innovation Agency is a government agency with about £6 billion to their name to invest in different projects around the country, will be able to endorse individuals. And I think what the Home Office is trying to do here is bring in people with a science or mathematics or engineering background and build up some of those industries, build up some of the research projects that are going on at the moment to help universities. And that is also part of Brexit. We're losing ties with the European agencies who invest a lot of money in the UK, so it's got to be made up from somewhere else.
Does that apply to, and we've talked about the tech side of it, does it apply to doctors and nurses and skilled people? Does that come under global talent, or is that a total different scenario?
I think the global talent specifically is targeting science, mathematics and engineering, but there will be changes to the system as a whole. I think what we're expecting to have is particular fields where there's shortages in the country, in this country, nurses, certain engineering positions, even down to skilled chefs in restaurants. I think there will be changes so that more of those individuals can come to the UK also.
And what about arts or sports or things like that? If you're a particularly talented sportsman or woman, or in the arts, singing, theatrical side of it, does that come under this visa, or is there a particular area that can be
not specifically this visa, but there is already rules allowing people for those fields to come in. I mean, it comes about to even football, isn't it? In Premier League football clubs,
course,
they've got to apply for a specific visa, a sports person visa. I think again, it's an area, especially when it comes to entertainment, that there will be changes, and that's what we're looking forward to.
So, getting back to the technology sector, what kind of requirements do you need to have one of these visas applied to you? I mean, do you have to have academics in certain areas, or what's the policy needed?
So the announcement with the Global Talent Visa, it basically comes down to one thing, which is endorsement by this UK Research and Innovation Agency. So it's quite government controlled. You apply to the agency for endorsement and you've got to demonstrate what your background is, what your qualifications are. Some individuals may already be taking part in research projects with universities abroad or in the UK. If that agency endorses you, then you're fast-tracked all the way to the visa application, and effectively you'd expect a visa to be granted.
And that's done from your home country to start with before you come to the United Kingdom borders.
That's
obviously,
right. I mean, the current system and the system will always allow switching, so you can come to the UK in one category and move into another one. So I think it'll apply to people who are already here in another capacity. But I think what the Home Office are really looking for is to bring people from abroad, from scratch, with these skills.
If you come in under a global talent visa, does that expedite your ability to be a British citizen, to get a British passport, as opposed to maybe a refugee visa initially? Is there any difference in those two?
Yeah, as we discussed, where the other categories, it can take at least 5 years or 10 years to qualify for settlement, and then another year before you can apply for nationality. One of the benefits I think the government want to impose on this global talent visa is a much shorter period to get into settlement. So the talk at the moment is it'll be a 2 or 3 year period, after which you become settled, get your indefinite leave to remain, and 1 year following that you could apply for a British passport if you so wish.
Now, when people come to see you, Sandeep, when people come to ask for your advice, is this particular topic, whether it's the global talent visa or kind of refugee status, is this something that you can help people with straight away, or do you have to direct them online and they have to do something first? How's the best way for people to...
We can often help people straight away. It's important to know exactly what their circumstances are, what impacts there could be because of their immigration history and because of the visas they've been on before or where they lived before. So it's something that you always want advice at the very beginning of the process before you take any kind of step with the Home Office, any kind of application is made. You should always get that advice.
And if you had a choice, maybe you're an ultra-skilled chemist, for instance, and you come under the Global Talent Visa, or you could get another particular type of visa, is there any benefit for you to do one or the other, or cost implications, or how are you guided as to which visa you need?
I think the new categories that are coming up now, including the global talent, I think it's going to be the one for people to choose, because that category in particular is replacing the previous one. With a new category like it, I think you expect the government to actually get behind it and make sure it lasts. So you can be confident that if you fulfil the requirements in the category, you achieve your end, which is to settle or to get your British nationality. So anything that new comes along, if you do qualify for it, is certainly the way to go, and not rely on categories that existed previously if you can qualify for the newer ones.
Now, going forward, are there any other options that people are going to be able to choose from to enable either visas or British citizenship at the end of it?
I think the global talent is one of it gives an idea which way the government are going. And I think what we're expecting is similar categories like it. One of the big talking points at the moment with the government is the Migration Advisory Committee, who guide the government about which roles we have a shortage of in the UK. And in particular, I think the areas like nurses and certain surveyors and engineers, those will open up, and we will have the option of coming in where they haven't had before.
Now, you must be experiencing, obviously with 13 years of experience and over that now, are you getting a lot of calls, people asking specific questions or having specific needs? What's the kind of common phrase or the common question you seem to be asking at the moment or getting asked?
Across the board, it's refusals. It's the Home Office will find it still, even in this day and age, they'll find ways to refuse if they can. We know from cases that lead to an appeal, 50% of decisions are being overturned. So it shows you how bad the decision making is on the Home Office end. So it's refusals across the board with immigration applications, and often for a small mistake that's been made or something the Home Office didn't accept. That's a trouble. That's the everyday trouble that we hear and see. So
50% are overturned from the original decision. So actually, it's a good thing for our viewers today. Actually, don't get disheartened if that is the case, because there is a very high chance that you could be, getting the visas and citizenship that you actually wanted.
Well, not every decision that has a refusal is appealable. Some decisions can be appealed to the Immigration Tribunal and others can't. But there's always another way to challenge, either directly with the Home Office or, as we've discussed previously, through the process of judicial review. So advice in these situations is really important.
Is there a particular subject or a particular refusal that you can't challenge or go back on or ask for a second opinion on, or is there anything under that category?
Well, all the working categories. So the points-based system, which is one of the big parts of the immigration system, students, work permits, highly skilled people coming in to invest in the country, those decisions cannot be appealed at all. So there's no automatic right of appeal to the tribunal, and it has to be fought directly with the Home Office or through the process of judicial review. And obviously, if someone's coming to the UK to invest their money and their time and to get into business, they don't want to be stuck in an appeal process. So that's a category that is really important to have advice on before you even start the process.
Here's a question I was going to ask you, and somebody was talking to me about this the other day. If I've applied for a visa under one guise as a refugee or coming from another country because I want to be a UK citizen eventually, and I get turned down, am I able to apply for a visa under a global talent visa application status?
Yes, you can. A refusal on its own shouldn't lead to any trouble on another application. The Home Office keep all the records, so they'll know if you've applied before, and you've got to declare that you've applied before and perhaps been refused. But as long as there wasn't any bigger issue in the refusal, there can be an allegation of incorrect information or false documents. As long as there's nothing like that in the previous refusal, it shouldn't have any impact on a further application.
And if you've had some sort of record under your name in your home country prior to coming to the United Kingdom, I would imagine obviously that's going to cause some issues with you getting visas and citizenship going forward.
Potentially. Again, it depends on the severity and what type of matter it is. If it was a civil matter or something, like we discussed earlier, criminal conviction. But the important thing is to declare. Not declaring or giving wrong information is a ground on its own to refuse an application, whether you otherwise would have qualified with the criteria in any case. So just not telling them something, that's not being open about your history is a ground to be refused. And that's not.
And if you've been granted a visa and you maybe not have declared something that you thought would go against you, and you get your visa, and then the government later on find that you didn't declare things, can they renege on the visa that they've given you?
Depending on the severity, yes, they can.
They can.
Yeah, there are the rules do allow them to revoke a visa and curtail it, cut it back. So again, giving full disclosure or knowing what you've got to declare and what information that the Home Office don't require. Sometimes it's just interpreting what it says on an application form, whether it's on a piece of paper or if it's online. But knowing what information must be given and what information you can hold back, that's an important part of this.
And likewise, as we come towards the end of the show as well, British citizenship, if you're granted British citizenship, you get your passport, is there any way that can be taken off you if you've come here from a foreign country?
Well, this is something that's been in the news in the not too distant past. With serious criminal convictions, yes, they can take all your nationality away from you. The requirement is, and it is a topical issue, this one, it's in the news quite often, is that you shouldn't be left stateless if that happens. So it shouldn't be the case that you can't take nationality from another country. And that's often where the dispute comes, if you could actually go back to the country you were from originally and take the nationality from there or not. So the power exists. It does really depend on what you've done, and that comes down to criminal convictions.
So as a quick sum up, as we come to the end of the show, kind of if you're applying for a visa, generic visa, as we say, before we get onto the global talent, what's the best course of action you should take?
The circumstances will differ between individuals, so often we're dealing with applications from people who want to bring their family members over, a partner or a child, or at the same time people are coming into the UK to study or to invest money or start a business. Important thing is always advice, just making sure you know what options you have. Sometimes people will qualify for more than one category, but knowing how long you've got to spend in that category, what the longer term impacts are going to be, extending the visa, getting to settlement, it's getting advice very early on. That's the important thing.
And it's kind of one of those subjects that as we said, with the EU, with Great Britain leaving the EU, things can change going forward. So maybe the question or the answer that you hear today might not be the answer that you hear in 12 months' time.
That's certainly the case. With the immigration rules themselves, government can introduce a paper and the rules can change within several weeks. And specifically because of Brexit and the changes happening there, that the rules there have been in place for 40 odd years, it's a real period of change. And yeah, you've got to expect the unexpected.
And as a specialist in this subject, do you get any heads up before the law changes, or does everybody know at the same time?
We get to, well, the information is released publicly, but actually digesting it and knowing what's actually being changed from sometimes several times a year can be difficult. It's accessible to everyone, but digesting the information, understanding what parts of the immigration rules have changed or what new requirements come into a particular category, even if you're extending in a visa you already have, that's something we always suggest an individual gets advice on.
Well, Sandeep, thank you very much. Great advice as always, and a great way to end off the series. Thank you very much. Well, there you go. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, and I hope you have enjoyed the show and the series so far. I'd like to say a big thank you to Sandeep Chandy, who has shared his experience and viewpoints on today's topic. We must stress, as we always do, the views and opinions expressed in Legal Forum should be considered for informational purposes only and not case-specific legal advice. All topics are discussed in a generic nature, and it's important that you consult either with a CAB, law centre or a solicitor before relying on it. If you'd like to find out more about the Legal Forum or the topic we discussed today, then please do email us at legalforum@islamchannel.tv or visit www.islamchannel.tv. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.
This program is sponsored by Tilson Solicitors.